Hello everyone, thank you for joining our webinar called Demystifying US Equity Quotes and Prices. This is the second part of our two-part webinar, and we will be talking about costs, delivery, and integration of US equity quotes. My name is Stéphane Dubois, and I'm the CEO and founder of XIgnite. Thank you again for joining our webinar. This is the second part of our session. Last time we talked about venues, quotes and prices. We talked to you about the different types of quotes and prices, talked about the different exchanges. In this session, we'll focus on a few things: fees and agreements, reporting and usage, which is a complex area and where people have a lot of questions. And we'll basically do your basic education on this. We're not going to have the opportunity to go very deeply in it. And then we'll talk about delivery and integration. And we'll finalize the session with a small demonstration on how you can consume APIs. So let's talk about cost. There's three factors coming into play around cost and complexity of integrating and obtaining US equity quotes. You have the data licensing cost for sure, and we're going to spend a good amount of time about that, talking about this. You also have to worry about data delivery as well as data integration, and we will touch on those two topics as well. Let's talk about fees, agreements, reporting, usage. Certainly a very meaty topic. The first thing to realize is that market data is not free. We certainly talk to a lot of people who always wonder why, this stuff is available for free on Yahoo and Google. How come I can just get it for free? Well, that's not how it works. It's actually a very complex domain where the fees and the regulations and the rules change on a regular basis. It's also a highly regulated domain, especially access to real-time information is highly regulated by the SEC in the name of providing equal access to information for investors. Of all the exchanges we talked about during the part one of this webinar, only 3 exchanges target non-market participants, that is, folks who just want to have access to this information and not necessarily trading on those exchanges. And those 3 exchanges are NYSE, NASDAQ, and BATS trading. Other exchanges also deliver data, but only mostly targeted to firms trading on the exchange. Now, fees is a complex area. They depend on a lot of things that you have to understand and master. Here again, we're just trying to get you a feel for what those factors are. The primary problem is source. Whether you get data from NYSE or NASDAQ or BATS is obviously a very important element. And we did talk about this in the phase 1 of the webinar. Breadth of information is, of course, important. Are you getting single exchange data? Are you getting consolidated data, like CTA information? As we discussed last time, delay is important. Delayed and real-time data will affect your fees. Depth of information, whether you're just getting the last sale price or the best bid and offer, or the full depth of book, this will affect your fees. How do you get the data? Are you directly connected to the exchange? Or are you indirectly connected to the exchange through a vendor or a distributor? Will affect your fees. How is the data distributed to you? Is it through a data feed? We'll talk about that. Or is it through a hosting of a widget, for example? These will affect your fees. What type of user are you talking about? Are you displaying the data to professional users, to non-professional users? This is a huge impact on fees. Where are these users located? Are they employees of your firms, or are they external clients or potential users of your application? Are you going to be displaying this data? Are you going to be using this data only for machine trading, for example, which would be called non-display? And finally, what type of display if you're displaying? Is it a terminal? Is it for web? Is it on a TV, on a billboard, or on an IVR system, voice response? All those elements will affect pricing. So be mindful of this as you think about pricing of information. Now let's talk a little bit about the flow of data so you understand the different actors and how things work. When you talk about integrating market data, typically you're trying to deliver data to some users. We're going to focus right now on display of information. So the users consume the data through some application. The flow of data comes initially from the exchange. The exchange actually owns this data. Right? They have IP rights to this data, so they own it. They'll distribute it to you either directly or through a vendor. The vendors might consolidate data from multiple exchanges, or from a sub-vendor who might be consolidating data from exchanges or sub-vendors as well. And you are, if you're the one who's running the app, who's displaying the data to the user, you're the distributor. You're the final distributor of this data to the exchange. Now, some of those steps, again, are optional, right? Xignite, for example, is both a vendor and sub-vendor of information. And most of our clients are distributors of this information. Now, let's talk about the flow of money, right? And this relates to licensing fees and whatnot. If you're a vendor or a sub-vendor or distributor, most likely, with a few exceptions, you're going to have to license the right to distribute the data from the exchange. You're going to have some agreement. You may have to pay some fees associated with this agreement. The user may also have the need to license the right to use this data from the exchange, typically around real-time data. But exchanges have different ways they price and distribute this data. But you have to worry about, for real-time data, about the user's license right to use. Licensing access to the data, licensing the right to the data is quite different from getting access to the data. It's one thing that you can use it. It's another thing how you're going to get this data. So the distributors, the sub-vendors, the vendors pay typically their upstream provider for access to this information. That is for feeds or APIs and whatnot, which is going to actually deliver the data. Users, of course, may pay access to the data, or they may not. If you're displaying delayed data on a public website, you're not going to charge your users. But if you're displaying real-time data on a pay site, you will probably charge your users. So some of those money flows, if you want, are optional, and the italics ones that we show here are the ones that are optional. Now let's talk about the licensing fee, the top part of this. There's really two types of licensing fees. There's those that relate to usage. So they could be user fees, or they could be per query fees, or they could even be enterprise fees. Exchanges have many ways to do that. And then there's those who relate to just the right to distribute. And they are either distribution fees or administration fees. Right. So let's talk about the distributor fees. Those distributor fees are typically monthly fees. They're fixed. You pay a flat fee for it, and you pay the exchange, at least in the US, you pay the exchange monthly for it. You will pay those distributor fees anytime you receive a data feed. And a data feed is a concept defined by exchanges. It's essentially an uncontrolled data feed. So if you get it, if you receive a data feed from an exchange or a vendor or sub-vendor like us, you're going to pay that distributor fee. Any continuous feed, a socket feed, for example, or an XML feed like an API, will be considered data feed. Sometimes you can waive those vendor fees, like some XML data delivered by exchanges could have distributor fees waived. The only times where you don't pay distributor fees is if you receive data through a terminal. Let's say you're a Bloomberg user. You don't pay distributor fees. You just pay the end user fees. Right? Bloomberg pays the distributor fees. Any kind of controlled application like that, the person who owns the application pays the distributor fees, not the user. The other thing is if you receive data through a widget, like a widget hosted on somebody else's website but showing up in your applications, you will not have to pay distributor fees for just hosting that widget. Now, direct access fees are also charged by exchanges. These are charges that exchanges will make you pay if you get a direct feed from them. If you get a feed from a vendor, or if you get an API from Xignite, we'll charge you different access fees. But exchanges will separate the access fee, which is the physical link that they're going to give you with the data on it, versus the license fee, which is the right to use the data. By the way, exchange distributor fees will always exclude, indices. Exchanges tend to license indices and equities differently, and we've been talking about equities in this webinar. This table shows you what the monthly distributor fees are for the main three exchanges we talked about, NASDAQ, NYSE, and BATS, for the different types of data we talked about. So delayed, and then the different types of real-time data, starting with last sale and going all the way to depth of book in level 2. You can see that for delayed data, only NASDAQ charges a fee to a distributor or vendor. If you get it indirectly, you pay $500 per firm per month. These are monthly fees. If you get it directly, you get a feed from it, you'll pay $1,000. And you have an admin fee on top of that. NYSE doesn't charge you anything, but of course, they will charge you something if you take a direct feed from them. They won't give you a delayed direct feed, so you'd probably have to take that from a vendor. For real-time data, there's different pricing here, and I'm not going to go into all of those. Certainly, you have this page available for reference. You can take a snapshot of it right now, or you can go back to this information later. But the fees varies for NASDAQ and NYSE, certainly, what the models are. You can see that if you want real-time CTA UTP data, which is the consolidated data, CTA is NYSE and NASDAQ is UTP, you have monthly fees, monthly distributor fees for that based on the scope of information. Notice that BATS does not charge for real-time depth of book data, that you wouldn't have to actually pay any fees for that. They have a last sale product for which they actually charge. Let's drill down into usage fees a little bit. When you talk about usage fees, there's a couple of things you have to worry about. Types of users. Are users professional subscribers or non-professional subscribers? Non-professional subscribers are quite defined. This little definition here, basically, and this is a shortened description of it, anybody who is involved in the industry as an advisor or as an employee of a financial institution pretty much is considered a professional subscriber. If you are not one of those persons, or if you're doing, essentially using information in the context of your own investments, you're going to be a non-professional subscriber. So the rule of thumb for me is if you wonder if a person is a professional subscriber, they probably are. It's going to be pretty obvious that a person is a non-pro. Location of users, of course, is important. Externals are clients, website users, subscribers through behind a password-protected system, for example. Internals are employees or contractors. Right. User fees, what considerations do you have for this? Well, there's going to be the per-user pricing will be the basic model, but there are some additional options there. There's the per query pricing that is sometimes available for some products and some exchanges. Some enterprise licenses are available as well. You also have the option to license regional exchange data, which we're not covering in detail here, like from the Boston Exchange or the Philadelphia Exchange. Non-pro fees can be capped, so that if you have a web application where you have a lot of non-pro users, instead of, if you have millions of people using your app, the exchanges will cap those fees so that you don't pay billions of dollars for it. Right? There's also special pricing for all kinds of display, like IVR, non-display, billboard, television. If your application falls into one of those categories, you're going to have to look for the specific pricing for those. And you can look at the NASDAQ and NYX site for more information. The monthly user fees, for delayed data, there's none. That's pretty straightforward. Depth of book information is a lot more expensive than level 2 data or CTA data or BBO data or last sale data. This is since this is ordered in the order of value and depth of information, a pro user will spend a lot more on, for example, NASDAQ depth of book product, which is their total view product. Pro users will pay $70 a month, a non-pro $14. While for last sale only, you'll pay 60 cents per user for the NASDAQ codes and 30 cents per user for non-NASDAQ data. That is securities traded on NASDAQ, but actually listed on NYSE or NYSE Market. And NYSE prices are different, kind of same order of magnitude, but essentially, the same model over here. Note that the CTA UTP pricing, which is access to the consolidated feed, is going to be the most expensive option. NASDAQ charges $20 for pros, NYSE $127 for pro users. Although this is for the first user only, and the more users you have a big sliding scales from this. And actually behind all those pricings that you're looking at, what we're showing you here is the pricing for the first users. Some of those have sliding scales so that as you add users, it gets cheaper over time. You can certainly see the big difference between pro and non-pro users and why it's very important to make that distinction. Some vendors do not have per-user pricing for some services. So, for example, the real-time reference price web service, RRP web service from NICE only charges per request, since this is an API service. Now, agreements. This gives you a little idea of what you're going to have to pay. Of course, all those fees are going to be backed up by an agreement that you're going to have to sign with exchanges, one with NASDAQ, one with NICE. If you receive a data feed, if you receive real-time data, you're going to have an agreement. Now, if you're an individual and you're not receiving CTA data, for example, you're receiving BATS data, you're not going to need a data feed. If you're receiving NICE data as a firm, NICE delayed, no agreement required. But NASDAQ delayed, agreement is required. And if you're a firm or an individual who is you're receiving BATS data, but you're not receiving this data directly, you're getting it through a distributor like Ignite, you don't need an agreement and you don't have any fees. So agreements are worked directly with the exchanges. Your vendor or your sub-vendor can help you, initiate the process with the exchange and certainly put you in touch with the right folks over there. And agreements will define reporting requirements. For reporting, you're supposed to provide detailed reporting for all real-time external professional subscribers, any real-time delay or delayed data feed recipient. So if you receive a feed and you redistribute a feed to somebody else, you're supposed to report it. So we distribute feeds to a lot of our clients. We report all our clients as data feed recipients. Ignite does not directly, for example, report external professional subscribers. Our clients do that. They have an agreement with the exchanges and they report those directly. You do not need to require reporting for delayed internal and external subscribers and real-time non-professional subscribers. BATS, as mentioned earlier, requires no reporting. Reporting is done monthly, and each exchange has its own reporting system. It can be a fairly involved process. It's going to take you a few hours a month. If you have a lot of users, it could be a few days a month. So it can be an involved process. And exchanges will bill you based on what you report. They can back bill you for misreported data, and they can audit you. So certainly the rule of thumb here is to very closely follow the exchange requirements. Make sure you report everybody and you follow the rules. Usage, of course, is highly restricted. Sometimes it's restricted by agreement. Sometimes it's only restricted because of the fees. That's so significant that if you were not to follow the rules, you'd have to pay massive amount of data to the exchanges. So public website display is allowed for delayed data. It's restricted for real-time data, and we'll talk about it next page. User licensing generally means you cannot display real-time data publicly. So if you have to pay, for example, a fixed fee per month for each non-pro user for public display, and you put real-time data on a public website, you could have millions of users and therefore be liable to pay millions of dollars in fees back to the exchanges. So because of that, you really don't want to put real-time data, unless allowed specifically, on a public website. You want to put it in password-protected area and essentially follow these rules. Again, usage is also restricted if you have a special agreement with the exchange, like you're only supposed to display it on TV or in a billboard. Those licenses and those fees are going to be specific to that kind of implementation. So let's see what this means. Delayed data, NASDAQ OMX, NICE Euronext, yeah, you can display delayed data on public websites. BATS, although you can get BATS trades data through those other feeds, they do not provide a specific delayed feed. Depth of book data, forget about showing that on any website if it's NASDAQ, TollView, or NICE Open Book, which are the depth of view product. However, BATS allows display depth of book information on public websites. Level 2 data is not allowed either. CTA and UTP data, no display on public website. BBO information is allowed under certain conditions. Last sale information is allowed under certain conditions. So, for example, NASDAQ has their basic product, which provide BBO not national best bid, best offer, but a VBO for NASDAQ trades, and that would be allowed for display on public website. And NYSE as an equivalent product. And of course, BATS allow display of any of the data on any site. So be mindful of this. Don't assume you can just display data in any way you want. You could be liable for very significant fees. Unfortunately, this is a complex domain. You're going to have to do some research to understand how things work. Now, once you get over the fees, you have to worry about how am I going to get this data, right? So there's multiple ways you can get data, of course, for people. Most data is delivered through terminals. If you get real-time data through terminals, you're going to have to pay the fees, or through portals or through Excel. And if you want to deliver data into apps, which is really the focus of this discussion, you can get market data feeds, like you could get from Thomson Reuters and other vendors. You could get widgets, or you can get APIs, which is what Xignite focuses on. The technology for those three is quite different, and there's some significant implication on your cost, especially of implementation and maintenance. A data feed is a continuous push feed. Essentially, you get a connection between the vendor and your data center over a connected line, either internet or lease line. You need a router. You're going to have to parse this feed. You're going to have to write a lot of custom code to do that. You're going to have to process every single quote and every single trade fed from the exchanges, which are quite significant. You have to write a lot of code and have a lot of infrastructure to be able to process that feed. And once you have that, you can feed it to your web app or your mobile app or your Windows app. So that's one model. The other one is a widget. A widget is essentially a small web page that is designed by a third party who puts them on their website, and then allows you to kind of insert that little web page or widget or applet inside your own page. So essentially, it's not yours, it's theirs. As a result of that, there's some benefits and there's some inconvenience, and we're going to get into this in a second. The third approach is APIs. APIs are delivered via open standards, XML, JSON. They're typically served from the cloud, so they're very scalable, very easy to use. Not every API is easy to use, but ours certainly are. And you can essentially pull this data on demand, right, from inside your web app, inside your mobile app, or inside your Windows app, using all these open standards. And of course, there are significant benefits to using those. So let's talk about those. The pros and cons. Feeds. You get every trade and quote down the feed. It's true real time sometimes and low latency sometimes. So of course, if you want nanosecond response time because you're doing algo trading, you're going to have to get a feed, right? But if you're going to display data on a website or on a mobile app, you really don't need to have a low latency feed. The downside of those feeds is heavy infrastructure. You've got to have all this hardware, software, and whatnot. It takes a long time to implement them. You're going to have to need extensive development skills, a lot of industry skills, because you have to process those feeds. They have complex logic with different trade conditions and whatnot. It's very easy to mess up. You're going to have to read a 200-page documentation, and your developer is going to be pulling on it for 2-3 months, and most likely, for the first time they're going to get it out, it won't be exactly right. So these are complex to maintain. They're expensive to license as well, and often, you don't need all this data. You don't need every quote and every trade. So you're really doing a lot of work and spending a lot of money for stuff you don't really need. Widgets, on the other hand, are quite easy to implement. A few lines of code and you change, and they're integrated. Reasonably affordable, and sometimes they allow you to dodge distributor fees, which is certainly valuable. Now, some significant limitations. They're typically website only. It's really hard to put a widget in a native mobile app, for example, on a Windows app. They're branded, so they can take traffic away from your website. You don't control the display. It's not very differentiated. Yours is the same as the other guys, right? It's very cookie cutter. If you need to do anything customized, if you really need to present information in a unique way, it's just not going to work. Right? APIs combine the best of both things. They're very easy to implement because they use standards. They require no infrastructure. Just pull data over the internet. It takes minutes to integrate them. They're affordable because you can pay as you go. You don't have to buy the whole thing and pay for the whole thing. You just pay for what you need. They can be used for mobile, web app, internal, any application. They'll allow you to customize the presentation in any way you want, and they're also very comprehensive. You have a lot of different things you can get there. What are the downsides? Well, you do, since they are flexible and allowing you to present the data in any way you want, you're going to have to do that part. You just have to worry about presenting the data. You don't have to worry about processing the feed. But you can make the use of the data very unique, right? And sometimes you might have to pay distributor fees as well. So just decision tree to think about when, which way should I use? Should I use an API? Should I use a widget? Here's a simple way to go about it, right? Do you need this done yesterday? If you need it done yesterday, you're going to go to the second branch here. Do you really don't care about the presentation? If you really don't care about the presentation, maybe the widgets will work for you. If you care about presenting the information, you need to be able to customize it, and you need it done yesterday, you're going to have to use APIs. Okay? Now, if you don't care about having it done yesterday and you have some time, you've got 3 months before you need this, you can go the other route. Then, are you sure you need 100% of every quote and trade for every stock in real time? Is it really what you need? Because it's going to cost you a lot. If you answer yes to this question. If you answer yes to this question, you may need a fee. But if, partial information, not every quote, not every trade, not every stock, the API is just going to be a much better solution for you. So remember, we talked about the 3 costs. We covered them all. You have several factors. You have the data licensing, which is charged by the exchange. We talked about different types of fees there, user fees and distributor fees. We have the data delivery costs, which are going to be charged by the vendors. Getting data fees is quite expensive. Widgets is going to be a little cheaper. API is going to be pay-as-you-go and quite inexpensive. Data integration, don't underestimate that. If you take a real feed, it's going to cost you a lot in development time and delays and whatnot. So do not underestimate those costs. Look at your total cost of data licensing, data delivery, data integration when you make your decision. All right, now we're getting to the final part of our session, which is our demonstration. Of course, what we're going to be showing you is a little bit of our own XIgnite products and how we can use API to access market data and equities quote. Quick little overview of what kind of products we have available based on the spectrum of things available that we discussed earlier. We have, of course, a delayed quote product called XIgnite Global Quotes, which provide delayed access to US exchanges as well as global exchanges. On the real-time side, we have several products. For last sale data, we have XIgnite NASDAQ last sales, which provides last sale information for trades executing on NASDAQ, but for securities listed on NYSE and NASDAQ and Amex. We also have XIgnite BATS Real-Time, which provides last sale and BBO information for securities trading on BATS. And again, listed on any of the exchanges. We have XIgnite Global Real-Time, which is a CTA UTP product providing consolidated real-time access to US securities, which therefore is fee liable in the ways we've discussed earlier. We have also a couple products which are not available in the XIgnite catalog, but available through our partner catalog. The NYSE RRP service, real-time reference price web service, is a XIgnite-powered service offered by NYSE, which you can find on their website. And we are planning to eventually provide a depth of book service equivalent, also powered by NYSE, and which will be provided on their website. Let's quickly talk about what the demonstration is going to be about. First, I'm going to show you the API catalog. I'm going to show you how to look up an API, and then quickly how you can easily pull an API data into Excel and do some very basic programming on how to get this data, as well as how you can get even real-time data and chart it in Excel, which is quite cool. So let's go to the XIgnite catalog. If you go to our website, www.xignite.com, you'll be able to pick on the products our web service catalog, which will be this tab. In there, we list all our different APIs, and we organize them by type of assets and type of information. If you click on the Equities tab, you'll be able to see all the equities web services that we have, which I just mentioned earlier. If you click on Exignite Global Quotes, you're going to get to our delayed service, which is the one I'm going to demonstrate to you now. So this is the home page for the service. It provides you with different information about the service. And there's a link here called Developer Docs. If you click on that, you will get to the list of APIs supported by that service. So we provide different ways to get the data. Certainly you can get quotes, but also take data and whatnot. We're going to click on Get Global Delayed Quotes, which is one of the APIs I wanted to demonstrate. If you click on this, it's going to bring you to this page, which is essentially a test form showing you the API. You can see the API has a couple parameters, identifiers, and identifier type. You can provide a comma delimited list of parameters, of symbols, or you can submit the same request by ISIN or QSIP and whatnot. We provide a lot of different tools you can use to understand how to use these APIs. We document the parameters. We provide sample SOAP requests. We even provide sample code in a variety of languages, C#, ASP, Java, and whatnot. So that makes it really easy for you to integrate APIs into your applications. Of course, you can, once you've registered for the service, which you can do by clicking on the try buttons, you'll be able to try the service and see how it works. So here we have a bunch of symbols that I've entered here, and that we can request by symbol. If I click on View in XML, it's going to bring me to this tab. It essentially pulled the results of my quote request and pulled those 3 quotes for those 3 securities in XML. Of course, I can look at the same information in CSV and whatnot. Now that we have this information, let's see how I can integrate this data into Excel. All right? So I'm going to switch to Excel now and go over here. And Excel, especially the latest generations of Excel, have made it incredibly easy to incorporate web service information. And that is an example of how easy it is to integrate APIs overall. So all I have to do is go back to this page where I was, cut and paste the URL that I was requesting, and go and type, select data from web, right? Then in the address, essentially paste the URL that I was requesting, press the Go button. The Excel will pull the XML document I was talking about. And here I just click on Import. I can then choose where to paste this information, and I'm going to press OK and paste it as is. You can see that instantly Excel threw all the results of my API call into Excel. I can do all kinds of things at this stage. I can delete columns I don't like, for example, to clean things up. If I want to remove the filters that show by default, I can delete that as well. And I can just keep the information that I want. And at any time, I can right-click on this table, choose XML, refresh XML data, and it's going to pull the latest quote from there. Right? So here again, XML, refresh XML data is going to pull the latest quote. Now, you can take this simple idea and take it a step further, and using really basic, simple VB programming, VBA programming in Excel, you can start building very interesting things. So this basic little demo that you looked at, I can make it a little pretty by spending 10, 15 minutes cleaning it up, and it would look like this. Now it's nicely formatted. And what I've done is, instead of using this right-click button, I connected a little macro to this Get Quotes button. So if I click on Get Quotes, it's going to fetch me my latest quotes and instantly show the data that I want for the symbol that I want. And I could go in this field and edit those symbols if I wanted to. So again, I can Get Quotes. Now, the great thing as well is I can start, if I want, streaming this data, but essentially requesting information every couple of seconds. So I'm going to click on Start Stream here. And what you're going to see is every couple of seconds, the system is going to essentially refresh, and the quotes that need to be refreshing will get updated automatically. Now, we are recording this during market hours, so the stock actually will change. Now, the amount of code that it takes to do that is actually extremely limited, and I'm going to show it to you in a second. I'm going to stop the streaming. And I'm going to show you that you can take things even to the next level. I'm going to go to another tab here, where here I'm created a little chart that is essentially showing Apple quotes in real time. In this case, we're using a real-time BATS quote service. What I have is a little table here that is currently empty, and that little table is getting charted on this chart. I'm going to start streaming, and what it's going to do is going to start pulling the quotes for Apple, and it's going to start charting them automatically. So as hopefully the price of Apple is going to modify, you can see this chart is going to get updated. And I certainly hope that we're going to see some modifications in this. So again, it's a very simple process to do that. Let me quickly show you what is involved as this chart keeps getting built up. If I click on the Developer tab, if I go to Visual Basic, this is the extent of programming that went behind this spreadsheet. And I have a little quote to get, I call my quotes with a button. This is the code to get a quote, and this is the code to stream a quote. So they're extremely simple to actually do that. And you can see as I'm talking, my little chart is getting updated over here with the latest information. So certainly, you can see how easy APIs are. APIs are really practical, as we've discussed earlier, to integrate a lot of different information, very flexible, very scalable. And so this is certainly one way that you want to consider on how you can get information. With that said, I will go back to my presentation and skip ahead. We've just covered this information. Mention a few resources that we have available for your later reference. Link to the NASDAQ information, NYSE and BATS, as well as the Xignite services that we talked about. If you need a copy of the spreadsheet that I just demonstrated, please email me at sdubois@xignite.com. And with that said, I'd like to thank you for attending this webinar. This is my information, my Twitter account, my LinkedIn account if you wanted to connect and discuss anything. Again, thank you very much for attending this webinar.